Hello and welcome to the IdeaCast interview series episode number 96. And my guest in this episode is Nicole Poulton. And Nicole is a recovery expert. And it took a long, hard journey to get to that status as a recovery expert. And she earned the title expert, as you will discover in our conversation. I want to say in this conversation we discuss some sensitive matters such as child abuse and drug addiction. So I will grant you that caveat now before we enter into this conversation, but I do appreciate you being here. This is what I consider to be an important conversation because this happens all too often in our society, and Nicole is a wonderful, amazing person who's not only a survivor, but again, she is a recovery expert. So enjoy the conversation, and big thanks to Nicole for being my guest. I'd like to welcome Nicole Poulton to the IdeaCast interview series. You're my 90th interview, so there's a little ray.
Yay!
So, welcome to 90, Nicole.
Oh, wow. Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited.
Oh, well, I'm excited too, and I'm looking forward to a conversation that may actually, and I don't say that in a cynical way, I think it's going to have an impact on people's lives, and I think this is a good one of those conversations that is going to have more of a salvific traction, like this is serious stuff we're talking about, and but I want us to have a really lighthearted conversation as well. So I appreciate you coming on in that context and being transparent to the world and sharing your story. So before we get into background things, but I think it would be a good idea just for our audience. Oh, and welcome YouTube audience, by the way. I didn't mean to ignore you guys out there. Sorry about that. Yeah. Hi, everyone.
Welcome all.
Welcome one and all. And let's talk about what you're doing in present time, and then we'll work it backwards. Kind of like a M. Night Shyamalan movie or Quentin Tarantino, we'll change the continuity a little bit. But yeah, I think it's really important that we start with where you are right now, and then again we can understand where you're coming from. So
yeah,
take it away.
I am 5.5 years sober. So just to put that out there, I had a drug addiction and it got pretty rough, and I was able to get out of that. And now I'm 5.5 years sober, and I've been just called deep in my heart that I need to share what I've learned and how, like, the success I've had with sobriety wasn't by accident, right? Like, so I recognize patterns on what I did right and what I did wrong, and the different ways of thinking and all of those things. And I just feel inspired to help other people do the same for themselves. I think addiction really touches everyone at this point in the world. We all know someone or are someone who has some form of addiction. And so I can't just sit on this information and keep it to myself. So I have been coaching people one-on-one and giving them the tools that they need to be able to accomplish sobriety and maintain sobriety for the long term. So that's what I'm up to now. That's really my passion project. I really like helping other people and seeing them win. And I think transitioning from an addiction, no matter what kind of addiction, into sobriety is such a hard shift. And there's so much shame and guilt that we put on ourselves, and we don't always have the best support group. And so trying to do it by yourself, I strongly believe that so many people can do it by themselves. It's just so much harder, and it takes a lot longer, and there's a lot of relapses and, all of the things. And so I think that by being a coach has been really fulfilling for me to see the progress and the speed in which people are able to heal and get better. So I'm just inspired to do that. That's what I've been up to.
And that's quite a bit, because when we had our pre-meet, we were acknowledging where, let's just say, the United States is right now in terms of a substance use crisis. I would say it is a bona fide crisis. And, when you said 5.5 years sober, it hit me like a ton of bricks. It's like, I've been sober 5.5 years. I didn't think about it, but January of 2017, I think I had my last sip of beer or whatever, and and I think, as I said to you, I titrated out on alcohol, but God, I have a long storied history of abusing things and stuff.
Yeah.
But yeah, I've been sober as a judge since 2017. So
That's
commonality there.
amazing.
Yeah, we're within a
Yeah.
few months or weeks of each other. So hats off to you for that. Congratulations, and to the longevity and
Thank you.
continuation of that. Yeah. And as I mentioned to you, I literally had a intervention by way of nature where I had a brain injury, and I can't do anything anymore. The
Yeah.
consequences are horrific. If I smoked a
Yeah.
joint or I drank alcohol, it'd be horrible. And so I'm
It's
really
not worth
fortunate.
it.
Yeah, and I'm super fortunate in that way because I am by nature a hedonist and I have an obsessive personality. So I have the sort of predilection for that kind of thing, and I certainly exercised it for 30 years. But
Yeah, you're
here I am.
primed.
Yeah, but enough about me and all that stuff.
Yeah.
But I say that to the audience because here are two people who, by different routes, have managed. Yours was probably more will oriented, whereas mine was more like you'll get a smack across the head with a baseball bat if you try anything. I dare you to try something.
Yeah.
Mother Nature, do it, because you're gonna suffer. But
Oh
you
my
had
gosh.
to really work and labor through that, and so
Yeah.
I am just always impressed by somebody who can come to a sober life the way you did, and so we're here to celebrate that. If there's anyone in the audience, I think, and you could, we'll certainly have contact information for Nicole, but we'll stop for a second, and we will have, I'll have some hotline numbers and things if you're in a place that's where intervention might be important or necessary. I'll make sure there's some things down below for you guys, and welcome again. Those of you who are
Yeah.
here, who are working through that. You're with two safe people here. So anyway, I'll stop rambling. So let's talk about historically your journey and what precipitated both in your youngest of years, your childhood, and then into what happened, because I think your what happened story is also important, again, given the
Yeah.
context of America. So I'll hush for a moment. And if you want to share what you're comfortable sharing to the audience as far as what brought you to where
Yeah.
you are now.
I am an open book, so everyone get ready.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Um,
And this is, and I say this in sincerity, we are going to be handling some difficult things, but again, there will be information down below. We will be talking about sensitive things, so be prepared for that. And sorry to interject, Nicole, but
yeah,
I just,
no. Trigger warning.
yeah.
Definitely. So my story, I feel like it's one that it can kind of be shocking to people, but when you break it up, there's so many different components that people can relate to. Like, sadly, from the bottom of my heart, it's it's really a problem that so many people can relate to every single part of my story. But I think when you put it all together, it kind of shocks people. So from the very beginning, with addiction, typically the addiction is a solution to a deeper problem, right? And so my deeper problem, I was sexually abused by my father from the age of 5 to 15. Like, my whole adolescence was not a happy household. My body was not mine. I was never allowed to say no to anything. And that, when your brain is developing and you're trying to figure out who you are and all of those things, and it's like your whole body is just like shed of you. Like, you don't have self, no sense of self. And so growing up, I had no direction. There was no guidance whatsoever. And there's just that deep sadness within, when you're going through stuff like that. It's just absolutely horrific. And at this point, I'm really glad that I'm able to talk about it. And I've done obviously a ton of healing, and I'm completely content and at peace. And I actually see it as a gift now. So I just want to pre-frame that for the audience. Like, this is really deep and important stuff to talk about. And it's not a bad thing if you can relate and you can't talk about it yet. Like, that's totally fine for the average person. I think I am just at this point where I was silenced for so long that I need to make the suffering mean something. I need to turn it into something good. So I was sexually abused, obviously physically abused, verbally abused, all of the whole mess of it. And then with that, I had no sense of like safety. And so I was risking everything, right? And so I wouldn't say adrenaline junkie, you know, I was still a kid. I can't go out and do all the crazy things, but I was really into sports, and one of my favorite sports is skiing. And so one season, I'm 15, and I was going down the hill. It was the last day of the season, and the snow was terrible, right?
Okay.
Like it's the spring, so everything is just ice. There's
Slushy.
no, yeah, it's not good. But I had to get my days in, right? And so there were no runs open. There was like the main groomers. I'm not sure if you're a skier, but there's like the main boring cat tracks and then the park. So with all the jumps.
Okay.
And so I'm like, okay, I'll go to the park and I'll just hit the jumps. And believe me, you guys, I am not good at the jumps, but I wanted to try them out. And so all morning I'm hitting the same jump all day. And on the way up, I'm on the chairlift going back up for another run. And while I'm on the lift, a giant cat, like the big groomer, comes through and they groom the jump that I was going on. So they scraped all the snow that was on it off and just left a sheet of ice. It was, and I didn't know that, you know, whatever. And so I go down the hill just like normal, and I hit the jump the same way that I had been hitting it, but I went off of a sheet of ice. And so I launched through the air. It's so crazy. Like time stopped. It just like slowed down. I was falling in slow motion. It felt like I was flying. And I'm just like, there's no way I'm going to land this. And so I didn't even try. And so I'm just like, okay, I land on my butt and I make this massive crater in the ice, and my spine. Yeah, sorry. This is not a comfortable image.
we need this though. Yes.
It just paints the picture of what happened that day.
Right.
This day saved my life. But ironically, my back, my spine buckled, and my L1 and T12, I had two vertebrae that completely just exploded. And they shattered. They went in every direction except my spinal cord. I don't know how I'm able to walk today. Like I was so lucky. But at the time I didn't think that. I was in a lot of pain.
Yeah, I can imagine.
So I'm laying there, and there's other people coming off the jump, and I had passed the landing zone for my jump. I had flown over the next jump and landed in that landing zone. So I was launched about 60 feet. It was absurd. And so now I'm in the way of someone else landing. And so I'm like, okay, I'm going to get more injured if I stay here. So I turned over and I army crawled out of the way because I couldn't walk. Like I couldn't feel my legs. And army crawling was probably not the best thing to do with all those little pieces next to my spinal cord. But here we are. I had crawled over to the side, and yeah, it turned out I had shattered my spine. And so going to the hospital, and you know, I had one of those super cute fancy back braces.
Yeah.
At 15, right, going into the summer, it was a statement.
Yeah.
So cute.
You were doing you.
Yeah. At the lake, just like a stiff board.
Oh, bless your heart.
No, but the amazing thing about that day was, you know, I was coming from a decade of sexual abuse, and you can't sexually abuse someone with a broken spine. I'm in this back brace, immobilized. You can't, you know, so that ended the sexual abuse in my life. So it's one of the greatest gifts to date, you know. So breaking my back ironically saved my life. And so obviously after that, there was like years of physical therapy and getting better and everything like that. But what then changed my life then for the worse, it was kind of like just this high and then this low. Stopped the sexual abuse, but that's what kickstarted my addiction. I was prescribed, this was in the days of doctors saying that narcotics weren't addictive or opioids weren't addictive.
Right.
Awesome. Great advice.
Just keep pouring it out.
Yep. Yeah. And
I remember those days.
Yeah. It was great.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
No, but my doctor had, I guess he was very confident that they weren't addictive, but just to be sure, we're going to prescribe you 2 different ones. So I had hydrocodone and I had Oxycontin. Okay. And so luckily for me, I got addicted to both. His mindset was that why not? His mindset was that I wasn't going to get addicted to either because I was going to alternate. And yeah, here we were, like terrible, addicted to both. And I honestly, I think my doctor was a quack because he was prescribing me over 200 pills per month. Yeah. And so like, that's just way too many. Yeah. But I'm 15 at the time, and my doctor, you know, an authority figure who went to medical school that you should trust, is telling me to take these pills. And if I run out, just call the number. I've got unlimited refills, you know? And so of course I'm going to do that. And, our brains are so amazing. So I told myself for years, like, oh, my back hurts, my back hurts, my back hurts. So I kept needing these pills. And over time, I realized like, oh, well, this also feels good for all this emotional distress that I'm in, considering I came from, you know, not having any control, no sense of self, just all of the negative things that come with the sexual abuse, terrible depression, suicidal tendencies, like all of these things. And so I just self-medicated for 6 years. And as time went on, I've moved all over the world. And there was a time I was 18 and I had moved to Puerto Rico, and Puerto Rico is a different land. They are very good at partying down there, and I was all for it. Right. And so I actually got into some harder stuff. By that time I was already like crushing my pills and snorting them. Like, you know, it's a prescription. So it was justified, but it's like, okay, but if people knew how I was taking them, it's obviously crossing a line. Right. Oh, yeah. But to me, in my young age, I had no idea that, I mean, I guess there was part of me that knew it was wrong, but the ethics had been just completely wiped of my life, you know, like with the household I was in, there was no path to right and wrong. And so I had gotten into doing cocaine in Puerto Rico, and I got addicted to that immediately. Okay. You know, that's one of the ones that it's all or nothing, right? Oh yeah. So I was addicted to that. And ironically, I had actually, so I grew up in Washington State, and that's where everything started. And then I was moving to Puerto Rico. But before then I was like, oh, I want to hit the ski season in Utah. It's like the world's greatest snow. I'm going to go to Utah and ski, because I broke my back at the end of the season. By the next season, I was already back skiing. Like it didn't slow me down. Wow. You know, I had to conquer it. And then once I did, I'm like, oh, okay, I'm fine. I won't go on jumps. Like that's my rule to the day. I'm like, I can't, I'm not good at the jumps. But I wanted to ski in Utah before going to live on this island. Right. And so while I was in Utah skiing, I actually met my now husband. And I think, I mean, it's crazy to look back and see what parts of our story changed the entire trajectory of life. Meeting him saved my life. It's so crazy. But so I met him and we hung out for a couple weeks, and then I'm like, okay, well, I'm still moving to Puerto Rico. Bye. Yeah. And you know, like no man can tie me down. Right. You know, so you said. Yeah, I know. Yeah. So, well, anyway. Yeah. I go to Puerto Rico and we just kept in contact. I thought I would never see him again, but I guess he liked me. Okay. Well. So we kept in contact, and after a couple months in Puerto Rico, I came back up to visit him, and we spent Christmas together, and it just kind of stuck. And he had standards, and
Okay.
that's not something that I had ever had before.
Okay.
And when it comes to like how I treat myself, at least. And he told me, he's like, I'm not trying to tell you what to do. This is your life. You're fully willing, like you're allowed to do whatever you want. I'm not trying to control you. But if you want to be a part of my life and my future, I can't be with someone who's doing cocaine.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, whoa, that's the first time in my life I'm being told that drugs aren't cool.
Okay.
Like that's a very weird dynamic when growing up. It's like,
Yeah.
drugs are awesome. It'd make you cooler, you know, all this stuff. And so I
Right.
think that that's something that a lot of people also have, you know, a connection to and a tie to, where you're told so often that drugs make you cooler, smoking is cool, you know, all this stuff. And it's like, this is the first time that someone's actually like, actually, no.
Yeah.
I'm like, what is wrong with you?
Yeah, square.
Yeah, loser.
Yeah.
No. But
that's
so
the mindset. Like when
that's
you're
the
in the
mindset.
bubble,
Yeah.
it's like, well, who are you?
Yeah.
Sober.
It was, yeah. It was very weird, but I liked him a lot. And so
Okay.
I'm like, okay, well, obviously cocaine is probably where I can draw the line. So he wasn't saying anything about my pills. He didn't know that I was snorting it and all that stuff. Like, to him, it's just, it is a prescription. It's a very valid reason. I broke my back, you know, like so many people, especially in America, have an injury and then they get hooked on some pill for the rest of their life.
Mm-hmm.
And so, but at the time it was acceptable because I justified it. It's like, I need this.
Yeah.
But the cocaine is like, okay, we can draw the line here, you know? And so that conversation with him, realizing that if I want him in my life and if I want to be with him, I have to choose between him or the drugs. And I chose him. Mm-hmm. And that was a very hard thing to do because you have that chemical dependency and that happens so fast. I was only in Puerto Rico for like 6 months. And so what actually happened was, to get sober, I had to leave the island.
Okay.
I wasn't able to keep myself in that same friend group, the circle of people. Just everywhere over there, everyone's doing cocaine. And I mean, at least the circles I ran in, I'm sure there's people over there that aren't, but you know, the circles I was in, it was like everyone, and they're all like, you know, put together, well-established people in the community. And it's just behind scenes, everybody's doing this. And it was blowing my mind, the stuff I saw over there. And so I had to leave the island. I moved in with my boyfriend, now husband. And, so then it's kind of interesting how I got sober. It's just, it all happened in phases. So the cocaine happened first. And then, we were living in Utah together, and he actually got a job in Hawaii. And he's like, okay, well, I want to make sure that this job works out before, you know, you come out. And so he left, and I'm like, just like in Utah, I'm like, what the heck? Okay.
Right.
Like, sure, go do that.
I'll sit on idle for a while. You know?
But my personality at the time, I'm like, you go do you, I'm going to go do something cool. So I moved to Lithuania.
Oh, there you go.
I'm like, I'm going to go to Europe. This is fine. I was actually volunteering. I signed up for this program, and I was like, what better way to do that? Like, I know English, I can help. Right. And so, and it gave me the opportunity to travel the world a little bit. And so while he was over in Hawaii, I was over in Europe, and that started, I mean, there was no authority figure. I was like 20 years old. And, you know, my boyfriend wasn't there. And so it's like, okay, now I'm like snorting a line of my pills at Buckingham Palace. I'm like, what am I doing? You know, it's like, I'm at the Eiffel Tower and I'm doing these crazy things. And it's like, I thought it was cool still. And it obviously isn't. It's kind of like, when I look back, it's like, that's sad. That's obviously someone who's hurting, where it's like, you're seeing the world, places I had never been before, and I have to numb in order to be okay. And it's like, that's not the goal, at least for me. That's not the goal. I'm not here trying to judge anybody in their lifestyle, but for me, that's it. Looking back, it's like, that's obviously someone who's hurting. And so flash forward, I'm turning 21, and at this point, I had moved to Hawaii, and we were having a great time over there. And then we had moved back. Like we had spent our year over there for the job and then came back to Utah. And so we had a group of friends and we're like, okay, for Nicole's 21st, we're going to go to Vegas. And I go to Vegas with everybody, and drinking was never really a huge thing for me.
Okay.
I couldn't tolerate it very well, and I hated being hungover. And it's just rough. But with my pills, there's no hangover.
Right.
And so like just keep using them and you're fine.
Oh, you can knock a hangover out really quick.
Yeah. So while I was in Vegas, the first 2 days was just my pills. I'm just using my pills and it's fine. And then the last day we're there, it's a Saturday, and I'm like, okay, we're going to go hard today. And so I start mixing. I start doing my pills and drinking, and I'm doing more pills than normal because it's our last day and we're going for it. And it's in the evening and we all Uber to a club, and I'm just thinking, like, I'm having a rough time in this Uber. And I'm just like, okay, I'm broke. Like, I'm 21. I'm like, I cannot afford the cleaning fee if I throw up in this Uber. So don't throw up. Like, that's all I'm worried about. And so we get to the club, and the bass is just like, you can feel it in your bones. And I'm just like, I feel horrible. And so everybody else went in, and my boyfriend and I actually Ubered back to the hotel. I'm like, I can't do it. I'm sorry, guys. Like, you go have fun without me, but I'm not good.
Okay.
And so we get back to the hotel, and we had been like day drinking at this point for like 2 days. Like, so my boyfriend just went to sleep, and I'm just in the bathroom and I'm throwing up, and I'm overdosing alone, basically, in my hotel room in Vegas on my birthday. I'm like, this is horrible. I had this epiphany. I'm like, I'm literally dying. Like, I felt so awful, like the sickest I had ever felt in my life. And I had this epiphany, like this out of body experience. And I just realized, I'm like, this is not my life. Like, this isn't me. Like, I choose something else. I don't know what this is. I don't know what the alternative is, but I choose anything else. And then I made it through the night, and then luckily I survived. And then the next day, the worst hangover ever, and we're flying home, and then I take Monday off. I'm just like chill, and then by Tuesday I'm using again. I'm like, what is going on? And at this point, my boyfriend is at work, and so he's like out of town, and I'm just alone in my apartment snorting my pills again. And I'm in the bathroom, and I see myself in the mirror, and I just look at myself, and I don't recognize myself at all. And I just ask myself, I'm like, what are you doing? Like, what is going on? Because this is obviously not a party anymore. Like, someone going to Vegas and having a party, like, it's easy to justify that, getting too drunk and, sick and whatever. But I'm alone. It's a Tuesday at 9:30 in the morning. And I'm like, what? And I just overdosed on the weekend. I'm like, this is a problem.
Yeah.
And that is the last day that I use, is that Tuesday. I had that heart to heart with myself. And I'm like, this is just, I was so disappointed in myself. And it showed myself that I actually can't control it. And so from then on, it was, that first year was a little rough, because I had to actually feel emotions for the first time literally in my life.
Okay.
Like, growing up being abused, I wasn't allowed to have emotions or an opinion or feel. It was just so much easier to numb everything that was happening because of what was happening. And so now at this point, I'm 21, and I've already accomplished a 6-year addiction, and having to learn who I am and learn how to feel and process emotions and not get angry and lash out at the people around me, and repair relationships that I had damaged during the addiction, and, put my life back together. And that was a really challenging year for me. But I really think that one of the things that saved me was my support system with my boyfriend and now husband. Like he was really understanding, and there was no judgment. And I had someone that I was able to just be completely vulnerable with. And I think that one struggle that a lot of people have nowadays is they don't have that person. They don't have someone who they can be open to. Like if they've been hiding their addiction from a spouse or, you know, their family, and they don't feel like they can actually open up about it. I think that's something that I love about what I do, is I can be that person for them. And knowing that that's one of the major crucial tools in the tool belt that you need to get sober, I think bridging that gap and being that piece for someone is really nice, because there's obviously no judgment and I know exactly what they're going through. And so taking from my experience and helping other people through it has been really fulfilling. But yeah, so that first year was really rough, but I remember celebrating my first year sober, the level of pride that I had actually held on to all of my pills that whole year, because I didn't know, like, what if I need them again, you know, that anxiety and that fear. So I couldn't rid my house of anything or of all the pills, because I knew, like, okay, worst comes to worst, I'll just go get it again. Like, it's easy to fill a prescription, and my insurance, it's like, it's $4 for a bottle of 100. Like, it's very affordable.
Wow.
And so it's absolutely insane.
Yeah.
And so I had held on to all my pills. I had probably 500 pills that I had hid them in my house, made it to where it was like a challenge to get to, but I could if I needed to, you know what I mean? Like I had to play mind tricks with myself in order to stay sober. But to celebrate my 1 year sobriety, I actually took my giant bag of pills to the police station and I surrendered the pills. And it was one of the most freeing experiences I've ever had in my life. Like, to know that it didn't have a grasp on me anymore. I was in control of my life, and I wasn't getting rid of them because I knew if they were around, then I couldn't control myself. It's like, no, I'm doing this because I know that I don't need them. So that was very, very fulfilling and freeing for me. And since then, it's just been being okay to talk about it and to heal from all that past trauma that I had experienced, and sharing my story. And I found that sharing my story not only has healed myself, because I can recognize different patterns and different things like that, but it's also influencing other people to be able to heal and give inspiration as well as tactics to be able to move forward, whether it's like from addiction itself or from like complex PTSD or from, you know, the sexual abuse. Like there's a whole mess of things that come with that. And or even just, I mean, the injury by itself, like sometimes you can have a perfect childhood and get injured and then just go down this slippery slope. Like you don't have to have like the worst childhood in order to have something like this. But yeah, it's been really good. My journey is, I feel very blessed in a lot of different ways.
Oh, I would say, yeah, absolutely. Things were happening at the right time in your life, or things showed up for you. And so a couple of questions. The decision to stop taking the pills or stop snorting, were you dealing with a lot of strong withdrawal? Were you able to get Suboxone, or how did that manifest? How did that work out?
So I actually had no idea that there were resources that I could have used. I did everything by myself. Like it's kind of like the way I was raised. I didn't know that other kids didn't have that kind of relationship with their dad. I thought that was normal, right? Because it starts so young. So with the addiction, it's like, I didn't know that this isn't normal. I didn't know. I was so uneducated or sheltered, I guess, in the world of sobriety. And so I didn't know that I could go to a doctor and get help. Because a doctor is what got me there. So it's like, I don't trust anybody to be in charge of my future. Yeah, I didn't understand. And so I actually had a really hard time that first probably 2 years of like even taking vitamins. Like anything I had to take had to be a gummy, because I'm like, well, why is Tylenol better than hydrocodone, it's the same. It's all, man-made, manufactured in a lab. It's all bad. And so it was very black and white. I could not swallow a pill to stay sober. Like it was so all or nothing. But yeah, getting sober, I had probably a week and a half of withdrawals. It wasn't horrible. Like overdosing was definitely worse. And so I think that was one of the things that kept me going of like, okay, well, I could go through these withdrawals once, or I could have to go through these overdoses unlimitedly until one of them gets me. And so I created leverage for myself. And I think I just stayed in bed during the withdrawals. Like it was, my whole body hurt. And because I had that strong belief that my back was the reason why I needed all these pills, I had like tremendous back pain. Like it was pretty rough, but it only lasted for about a week and a half.
And that's good for if someone's in the audience listening and they're thinking about that step, that taking that very scary and crucial first step of, because speaking to my own abuse, you get that anxiety. At least I did. It's like, well, what if I'm cut off, or what if I can't get high or drink or whatever? And you think about it and you're like, oh, because sobriety is just scary when you're when you're getting high all the time.
Terrifying.
But that you went through a week of the discomfort of withdrawal is laudable and commendable. Some people it's more drawn out, I believe. I've not experienced that myself, but I've heard that it can be very difficult. So that's awesome that it wasn't more torturous for you to go through that. So of that week and a half, and you've already laid down some ideas for people that, you just kind of took time out for yourself, you laid in bed, you felt the experience. Were there any other kind of tips or suggestions that if somebody again is here listening and they're like, damn it, I'm gonna stop,
Yeah, I think one of the biggest things that I did for myself, and looking back, I'm like proud of myself because you had no guidance. Like there was nobody telling me this is what you should do. So what I did for myself was I gave myself tremendous grace. I let myself, like whatever I felt like I needed, I got. So I didn't force myself to cook at home. It's like, if I'm hungry, I'm going to get food somewhere else. Like someone else can cook for me right now. I'm going through something. So sometimes with getting sober, it's like you have a lot of responsibilities, and the more you can get those off your plate for the time being going through your withdrawals, like the better. Like take time off of work if that helps you. Like sometimes it might be better to distract yourself. So I'm not saying there's like one way to do it, but for me personally, it was taking time off of work, not worrying about food, like going out to eat, laying in bed. If I wanted chocolate, give myself chocolate. Like, don't care about necessarily what's going in, because as long as it's not narcotics, it's better than the alternative. You know what I mean? So sometimes I think like people get so, wrapped up in like, well, I need to be eating salads and quinoa. And it's like, no, you can eat a pint of ice cream every day. Who cares? You're not taking drugs, Give yourself some grace. It's better than the drugs. Yes, it is self-care.
Ben and Jerry's is self-care. It's a little medication, like that double fudge brownie. Watch out.
Exactly.
But no, I get that. And so, the art of self-care, which, drugs are a kind of perverse form of self-care and a not healthy and maybe an antisocial capacity, but
it's a way to self-soothe. It's just not beneficial.
No, right. It's a deceptive means of of caring for yourself, of caring. So another thought that came to mind is we have two different, I'm going to bracket things here. We have the addiction and then we have the abuse. And so I suspect, and I believe you told me that you were in therapy for the abuse. And when you were on your 6-year, in your 6-year career, we'll call it that if that's not a crappy way to say
That's
it,
great.
but
No.
that's what I called I had a
Yeah.
career in drug use and alcohol.
I say I'm a retired addict, so
there
that
you go.
actually
Okay.
works.
So
Yeah.
good. So I'm glad it lands well with you, because that's what
Yeah.
I say. I had a long 30-year career in drug use.
Yeah.
But so that was there overlap in the therapy? Or was your abuse therapy more or less behind you when you got sober, or did they transact with each
So
or transect
yeah,
or
no, this is a
whatever?
great question. So I actually I went to therapy in phases. For me, I don't know why, it's like I go for a little bit and it's like, okay, I feel like I have the tools that I need to get through to this next part.
Okay.
And then I go through it and then it's like, okay, I need more tools. Let me go back to therapy. So my first stint in therapy was I was 17, and that's actually, so the overdose that changed everything and that I got sober from was my second overdose.
Oh,
I had
okay.
an overdose. Yeah, I always forget about the first one. It
Well,
didn't register enough as a sign to stop when it
okay.
happened. So I'm just like, whatever. It was
Okay.
just a bad day.
Yeah.
No, but I was 17 and I was like rock bottom. I had overdosed at my friend's house, who was a boy who ironically was not my boyfriend at the time. And so it was like this whole thing. And so like I asked my boyfriend to come pick me up and he's like, no, like he's all mad that I'm at my friend's house, but it's like that was my friend that I did drugs with at school. And so it's like it just kind of overlapped into like, okay, well, let's do drugs outside of school. And my boyfriend wasn't into that. And so it was just really messy. And so after that, I was like really suicidal. And I'm like, I need help. And so I went to therapy for the first time, and that I was there for about a year and a half, up until I left my hometown. And so then it's like, I guess I'm done with therapy, I'm moving.
Yeah.
But that really, I was focusing on my relationship with my mom, because at the time going through the sexual abuse, it's so the mind games that my dad played on me. He painted my mom to be the bad guy.
Okay.
So they had divorced when I was 14, and I initially went with my mom, and she was just, going through a rough divorce, and she wasn't happy, and she took a lot of her anger out on me. And so I moved back in with my dad. And at that time, it's like, well, there's no rules at dad's house. It's all fun at dad's house, and the abuse kept happening. And I didn't know that was bad. And so,
right.
So he was like the fun parent, which is so wild. Like it's the fact that like looking back, realizing that that's what I thought was just insane. I knew he was mean, but he was like better, I guess.
Okay.
But anyway, so I was actually trying to fix my relationship with my mom in therapy the first time. So I'm in active addiction, wasn't even talking about the addiction, wasn't talking about, the overdose or anything like that. I'm like, mommy issues.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
so,
Well, one thing at a time. Yeah.
Yes,
Especially at
And
that age, right?
I thought that was the worst part of what was going on. And then speaking in therapy, it's like realizing like, oh, actually, I might have been sexually abused. Like this might actually not be normal.
Okay.
And then I went to Puerto Rico and went downhill and everything like that. And it wasn't actually until I got married, leading up to my marriage, it was about a year of engagement. And the 6 months before my wedding, I was getting really bad flashbacks. So I would be at work, working with customers, and I would be mentally getting sexually abused as a 6-year-old. It's like the weird stuff that your mind is able to do. It's like it was telling me I need to process something before committing myself to this other person. And so it was just really weird. So I ignored that though, because I'm like, I need to get married. I need to plan the wedding. And I thought that everything I do, I don't know why, I always thought that I could do it myself. And so it wasn't until I'm on my honeymoon and I'm having terrible flashbacks and I'm like, we actually need to go home and I need to start therapy. So we cut our honeymoon in half. We were supposed to be in Mexico for 2 weeks and we only stayed a week. And I'm like, I need to start therapy the day I get home. Okay. And so I went to therapy again, and she helped me realize that like all of this trauma that I'm carrying, it's not mine. It's like in a backpack, like bricks in a backpack. As I go on, I'm putting more bricks in a backpack. And she's like, only you are able to set this down. But the amazing thing is you can set this down whenever you want. I'm like, whoa. And creating that mental analogy to something I could picture, I'm like, I'm just going to set this down. So I set it down and I moved on. And I felt like that was a huge healing process for me. And I felt like that was the tools that I needed to be done. So I stopped going to therapy. And then it wasn't until I was, let me think. So it was after her, I had seen this ad actually for a Tony Robbins event. It was right after COVID. And so he was doing this free event virtually. And I remember being a little kid, my dad had a lot of Tony Robbins books and cassettes and stuff. And so I never listened to it or read any of it, but I remember seeing Awaken the Giant Within, his big Bible of a book, and seeing his face. So I remember being like 7 years old, seeing Tony Robbins's face and thinking like, I know that this man will help me. I know that I need to go to a seminar, but obviously as a 7-year-old, 14-year-old, like I can't afford that. There's no way I can actually get myself to a seminar. And so this is like the first time, like if God is real, like this is what he like guided me to this. It was like the craziest timing of everything. And so I saw this ad and it's a 5-day free challenge. And I'm like, well, if not now, then when? Because this is free. And worst case scenario, I just spend 5 hours? It's like an hour a day. And move on, you know? And so I went to him, and through that event, I realized that my back pain was all in my head, and all of this trauma with my dad was actually a gift. Like we effectively blamed like everything that I blame my dad for that's bad in my life. It's like, okay, well, what good did he do? Like I knew growing up exactly who I didn't want to be with in a relationship. And so I married the opposite. And so it's like, now I have an amazing marriage because of my dad. So it's like, wow, I need to effectively blame. So it was all of these different ways of like tricking your mind, I guess, reprogramming your mind into putting positive meaning on all of the negative experiences in the past. And so that got me through for the next, I don't know, 2 or 3 years. It was really, really beneficial. And then I kept having this dream. It was like a memory dream. And it was of when I was 6, there was this very distinct moment of sexual abuse when I was 6. And it was on Christmas Day. And so I've always had a hard time with holidays. And I always thought like, well, yeah, like if you don't have a happy family and you're forced to be together on holidays, it's not going to be fun. But then this dream appeared, and it's like, oh, this is a memory that I now need to process. And so the final stint of therapy that I did, I went in and I started doing EMDR. And it was my first session of EMDR that finally set me free of everything. And I was able to go in, and it was kind of like I had to walk hand in hand with this 6-year-old and be the warrior or the protector of her, and then let her go in and reprocess what happened and put a positive meaning to it. And it was very empowering, and it was very nice. And but yeah, so I have done a lot of different therapists, a lot of different types of therapy, a lot of different, the events with Tony Robbins and everything like that. So there's no one size fits all for it. And it doesn't always happen all at once. And so I think for me, realizing like it's okay to go to therapy for 3 months and then take a break for a year, like it doesn't have to be rushed. It just has to settle in, and, you're reprogramming your mind to get over all of this trauma. And that can take some time. And I think a lot of times people want it to go very fast. I know I was one of those people where I'm like, okay, I'll do like 5 therapy sessions and then I'll be healed and I'm good to go. It's like, That's not how it works.
Yeah, it's the American
But
way though, right? Let's
yeah,
do it and get it instant
yeah,
gratification, right?
exactly. Yeah. But
Oh, yeah,
no,
yeah.
it took years.
Oh, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, what you dealt with is the impression left, like you said, that 6-year-old inside of you, uh, until that last EMDR session,
Hmm.
had to be cared for, nurtured, etc., and recognizing that that was necessary is a feat in itself. So a question I'll ask, and if it's too much, let me know. But something that comes to mind, and this may be again of benefit to someone out in the audience, especially a woman. Um, Emotional and physical intimacy with a partner after something as awful as this. Can you lend some ideas, thoughts, inspirations for others to
Yeah.
kind of bracket things and say, you know, this was not good and this was traumatic, but I'm an adult now, or I'm at early 20s, late
Mhm.
how would one sort through that by way of your perspective?
Yeah, so speaking from my personal experiences, because I mean, everybody processes these
Yeah.
experiences very differently.
Hmm.
So I feel very lucky because it's actually kind of ironic. Going through what I went through as a kid, I had a lot of, and sorry if this is too much, but I had a lot of anger, and I think I processed a lot of that through like having sex with my boyfriend.
Okay.
Like it was very not healthy, but it was
Yeah.
the only place I felt like I had control over my body,
Okay.
was being with someone.
Okay.
And so going into being with my husband, there has been different things that it's like, oh, I remember my dad used to do that. And it's just very important to be as open as possible and to communicate that, because if I didn't speak up and my husband has no idea and he's just going to keep doing whatever,
Right.
then he's not going to know, and it's just going to damage me more,
Okay.
right? It's going to
Hmm.
keep hurting me. So if I
Yeah.
speak up immediately and he respects me, as long as your partner respects you and you guys can openly communicate, which is one of like the most important things, then it I mean, I don't want to say then it shouldn't be a problem, but it's like it's so much easier to work through.
Okay.
And sometimes, like for me, if there's a trigger that reminds me of my dad and we talk about it and it's like, okay, we're not going to do that anymore, then it's not like a forever thing, because as I'm able to come into my body and I'm able to, like trust my husband, and I can recognize we're in a safe space and stuff, it's
Hmm.
like, okay, like it's not black and white,
Hmm.
so
Hmm.
for other people who might be struggling with that, it is definitely something that it can weigh on a relationship very heavily. And by being open and being able to talk about your experience and being able to talk about the abuse, or sometimes if it's like a one-time assault, like that can really, really mess people up mentally. And so it's like being able to talk about these things with your significant other
Hmm.
is so vitally important to the relationship and to you feeling safe in the relationship, because that's
Hmm.
ultimately what it is
Hmm.
if you're feeling these emotions, you're being put mentally, you're put back into that experience. And so if you're feeling like you're back in the assault or you're back in the abuse, then you're not in the present. And so it's like you need to do, or what helped me is like grounding exercises and like wiggling your toes. It's like that puts you in your body.
Right.
It takes you out of your mind and
Okay.
away from the assault or whatever. So
Okay.
it's just everyone is different, and
Yeah.
so experiencing or playing with different things that might be helpful, might not be. It's like it's a trial and error thing, and that's one of the things that I did talk about with one of my therapists, and she was giving me advice. And so finding someone who you can if it's if your partner and you can't figure out a solution on your own,
Hmm.
there's no shame in going and asking a professional of like, hey, have you dealt
Okay.
with this? What do you suggest?
Okay.
Yeah.
And I'm in awe that someone can trust. So this is more the emotional intimacy and the partnering, connecting, intimate relationality with another person. And I'm just in awe that you and others can do that, given the nature of what had occurred in the past, whether again it was a one-off assault or a serial event that lasted for years. So that I find it fascinating and inspiring that people can trust again. It's like, if you beat a dog repeatedly, and I'm not comparing apples to apples here, but if you torture a dog and it can break the dog, or the dog will eventually learn to trust again, maybe not by that person that did the abusing, but so I'm just, the psychology there, I just and I'm sure some people, as you said, nobody's the same, nobody's cookie cutter, that others this will be much more of a bigger mountain to climb in terms of learning to trust again and learning to expose themselves to intimacy, whether again emotional, physical, doesn't matter. So that you were able to do that is inspirational, I think, and for others and for myself. It just gives me some faith that humans are resilient and adaptable, and we can go through a lot and still lead a life that is fulfilling. I hate to say normal, because that's what the hell's normal. But it's just that
exactly. But
the big part of the bell curve, right? You're in the range of what is a good life and a well-lived life. And that, as you said, the backpack can come off, the bricks can come off your shoulders, and you can untether yourself from that history and that past. So
I honestly too, I feel very blessed. It's so interesting when I say this, because to someone on the outside, it's like, well, you were sexually abused for 10 years. But it's like, for me, it's like, it started so young, I didn't know it was happening. And so I feel like that was a benefit for me, because I found out that it all happened after the fact. Like, I didn't know that it was weird until later. And so I think that really helped me, versus if someone had a great childhood and they went to college and they had an assault, it's like, that is a distinct, like, I was violated, and so I think that it's so interesting how our brains process things differently, because on the outside it's like, but you were sexually abused for a decade, and it's like, well, but I didn't know until later. It's so weird. It's so weird.
Yeah, you would then have to impose the trauma back onto it, even though there was trauma. But it would have to be a secondary layer. I get what you're saying.
Put meaning on it, and it's like, oh, actually, it was not safe. It was not. And the realization later on, it's like, well, I'm already kind of a normal person. And then putting that heavy backpack on and realizing, wow, that's a lot that I went through, and then realizing, like, wait, I actually don't have to carry this, and then taking it off, versus someone else who has a different experience. It's so interesting how we all process it so differently.
Yeah, absolutely. And in a chapter of my own life, I was ignorant to what a healthy parent-child relationship was, even though I think I told you in our pre-meet that I was raised by someone I would identify as a covert narcissist with could go crazy sometimes, and it was a terrible, they did a good job on a lot of things, as we can credit the monsters with some things, but it took me till I was 33 years old to realize that I was in something that was just not right. And so finally I walked away, but for that duration of my life, it was normal. All the gaslighting and the head games and the fighting and the combat and all that kind of stuff just was normal. Is how you grew up. So I'm using that as maybe a light parallel.
You can understand.
I can see what you're saying, that it took me until I was 33 to just have this one day where I was like, holy crap, I'm childing all wrong, or whatever, you're sunning all wrong, and we're going to put an end to it, because I can spend the remainder of my life in another mindset or another frame. And again, to those in the audience, this is where a therapist is valuable. This is where trusted friends who may have gone through this kind of conversation is an example of having giving you that permission to go ahead and launch these kind of inquiries and say, well, am I in a healthy relationship, or is this not a healthy relationship? So just something to think about out there. for those of
Yeah,
you listening.
definitely.
So let's go, I guess, back full circle to where we are right now. And I think I asked you this when we had our first awesome conversation in pre-meet, to share what your vision is for the future, what you would want to have as your legacy, if you will, or what your path of development might be for the services that you provide. Let's vision that a little bit for what Nicole will be doing over the next, say, 5. We'll keep the 5 years, and
5
then we
years.
can
Yeah.
reset, and you can check
Yeah,
that.
we'll
Don't
come
want to
back
go
on
too
and be like,
far. Yeah,
okay, the next 5.
yeah, for the
No,
next
so this,
150 years.
yeah,
So anyway,
yeah,
being
science
silly.
is advancing.
Oh yeah.
We will
Your
live long.
generation will probably live a lot longer. But anyway, but
Yeah,
yeah, let's just stick
that's a
with 5
different
years.
conversation.
Yeah.
Yeah, so this is something I actually think about a lot now.
Okay.
Back in my addiction and in the trauma, it's like you think one day at a time. I did not have the ability to look into the future and see a future at all. And so it's been really fun now that I have healed so much and I'm able to think that far ahead. I'm just like, oh my gosh, the possibilities are endless.
Yeah.
So the legacy that I want to leave, I had this day when I was 10 years old. I had gotten it was a whole day of abuse, just awful. And I remember going into my bathroom and I was crying and I was very suicidal and I was thinking, I can't go through with this suicide because there is a day that I need to talk about what's happening to me and it will save someone else.
Mm-hmm.
I felt so strong. And I mean, that was a long time ago. I was 10 years old. And so now I'm stepping into that, that vision that 10-year-old had. And so my goal is to help as many people as possible get sober. I'm not a therapist. And so I think that when it comes to like the sexual abuse and the childhood stuff, like I'm someone to talk to, but I don't have all of the resources that someone might need. And so, but when it comes to addiction, I've been there and I've walked through it and I've created a system that actually can walk you through the same thing that I went through, but so much faster and easier because we're aware of what I did. And so it's kind of ironic because I think that anybody who gets sober has gone through this system, just not aware. So I've recognized patterns because I've gotten sober in different phases. I've done this many times. And so just with different drugs. And so my goal is to teach as many people as possible this system. I call it the CLIMB method. It stands for clarity, leverage, intention, mindset, and balance. And so with all of those components, it's very, I don't want to say easy, but it's very simple in getting sober.
Mm-hmm.
And then being a resource for people to maintain sobriety is very important because what's the point of getting sober if you're just going to relapse 100 times, right?
Right.
Like we want sustainability. And so that's what I teach now. And so my legacy, I really want to share my story as much as possible on as many stages as possible, because I know that the more I speak up, the less someone else feels alone.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously, like there's so many people out there, like little kids that are going through the same things that I went through, and it breaks my heart, and there's no way I can stop that. Yeah. But if I can prevent or stop their addiction that they might fall into afterwards, trying to heal from that, then, that's super fulfilling to me. I want to help other people not have to go through a 6-year career of addiction or a 30-year career of addiction and really curb it down. And just as soon as they recognize that they have a problem, I want to help them be able to just get out of it, because I don't want them to have to go through the years of struggling, of trying to figure it out by themselves, not realizing, like I did, that they have other resources that they can tap into, and I don't think that, even knowing now, like, I don't think I would have wanted to go to a rehab center that costs $30,000 a month for a very basic one, and going to a detox place and going to, these academies. Like, there are some really good resources out there, but they don't always vibe with you. And so recognizing that, like, these kind of conversations are what is super healing, and talking to someone who's been through it is very validating, because they can actually understand the emotions that you're going through, versus going to a therapist who might be amazing, but maybe they don't have, and like, they've never gotten sober, they've never had an addiction, they've
Yeah.
never lived it. And so
Yeah.
I think that what I'm doing with the coaching is definitely a new approach. Not like super new. I guess there are rehab or recovery coaches out there, but
Hmm.
I just think that the concept of them is fairly new. And so I think that by doing it this way, it is very personalized and private still. It's
Hmm.
one-on-one coaching.
Yeah.
You can keep your dignity. You don't have to go to these AA meetings with your neighbor. But I really am focused on speaking up as much as possible, and is helping as many people as I can.
Mm-hmm. So many things came up for me when you just said that. So I'll share a couple of
Okay, yeah.
bullet points that came out. And one interview I did about a year and a half ago was with she's a medical humanities professor, and one of her missions was to impress upon the lords of the DSM, Diagnostic Statistical Manual for Psychiatry, is the DSM-5 is the latest edition, 10 years old. I can't remember how old it is, but it's recent past, and the DSM's been around, I think, since 1980. So yeah, it's probably due for an updating. So anyway, in that process of updating, she wants to have the voices of those with the very conditions that are mentioned in the DSM to be present in the DSM itself. So it's an anecdotal contribution to the DSM-6, if there ever is one. And so the academics can, sort and file and put out the information, but that if with this added input of lived experience, she believes that this will be tremendously more valuable for therapists and psychiatrists to have good, valuable teaching tools. And so I got that vibe from what you were saying, where you are someone who has the lived experience. And in philosophy, there's a priori knowledge, which is like, I read a book about Nepal, but and I can tell you all about Nepal, all the statistics, but I've never been there. I've never lived in it.
Exactly.
So that's a priori. And then a posteriori is like, I lived in Nepal for 10 years and I read that book, so it's like,
yeah,
you're giving the a posteriori knowledge, as are the people with schizotypal diseases and pathologies can, there's something, the plural of anecdote can be data, and they can aggregate that data, sort for anomalies or whatever, and have something very valuable in the DSM-6. And so a long-winded way of saying that what you're doing, I think, is deeply credible and valuable in that sense. And you have the added perspective of someone who we could broaden the lens and just say was abused as a child, whether it was beatings or like, for me, it was all psychological and emotional torture, and so and it's they're different species, but the outcome typically can be the same, I think, depending on, there's always, room for discussion there. But when a child is traumatized, as you said, it seems normal at the time, but then you have to come to a reckoning with that. So and what was the other insight? And so, one thing you said, like with AA, and it's like, you can be anonymous, and you let's both do this. I'll do it in my way and you do it in your way. So to anyone out there who is dealing with substance use disorder, I guess is what they're calling it now. Back, when I was just a druggie, but substance use disorder. I was a druggie, but you can be a substance, however you want to frame that. There is no shame and there is no stigma. I mean, we are a country that was formed on puritanical principles and, penitence and things like that. And I think that's changing slowly, especially with the absolute tsunami, that shit tsunami of fentanyl out there. That's just doing so much, right? And meth, I mean, it's like the game has changed, and there's millions of Americans who are in some form or another dealing with this. And so I think that's going to crack open that old paradigm of stigma and shame, especially even alcoholism, like, and it's not to say that it should be celebrated, or, we don't want to go the other way with it. But I will say, this is my getting on my soapbox, is that there should be no shame. You can be, I mean, look at Nicole. She's being very transparent. I'm happy to, if anybody ever talks to me, I'm happy to share any story, all my bad experiences, and even some of the fun stuff, and it's like you compare, but you then say, oh, wait, but so this brings me to my last point on my soapbox, and I'll hand it over to you, is life in sobriety is amazing. It's absolutely incredible. You're not going to give up anything by being sober, by getting into sobriety. I promise you that. It doesn't, when you're on the other side and you're using and you're medicating yourself. I've been there, and it's very scary. It's just it's anxiety inducing to think that you might give up that whatever it is you're doing, and it doesn't matter what you're doing. But that on the other side, when you sober up, life is going to continue. It's going to be even more fun, because there's always a cost benefit on that drug use. Like with opiates, I remember, the day after, it's you're pasty, and even the buzz sometimes just like shitty. You're just like, oh,
Oh, that deep feeling in your stomach.
Yeah,
it's
like I used to. Yeah, like you, I used to
Yeah.
snort rails of OxyContin, and it's like sometimes you had a great one, and then other times you're like,
Not always the same
yeah,
pill
what's
in
in
that
my head,
bottle.
right? Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So with sobriety, it's a nice even keel, and life, everything is more enjoyable as far as I'm concerned. Everything. So I'll shut up for a minute and let you take that, and just for the audience, sober life.
Yeah.
Sober life is good life.
It's so interesting, because going, like, before getting sober, it was that fear of like, okay, can I not go to a party anymore? Can I not, do I lose my social life? Am I not gonna have fun ever again? All of this stuff. And with coming from the injury, it's like, okay, am I gonna be in pain forever?
Right.
And so the getting sober is really the hardest part, I think, is the decision, coming to that decision of, okay, this is what I'm doing. But being sober, you're right. And this isn't just like rah, like, this is real. You feel all of your emotions, and it's so much better than being numb. Because I think with addiction, no matter what your DOC is, your drug of choice, whether it's alcohol or it's opioids or it's meth, like whatever it is, you're numbing everything. And you can't selectively numb. You can't just numb the bad. You're numbing the good too. So if you think you're having a good time, that's actually numb. Yeah. So imagine if you weren't numb and you were having a good time, what that high actually feels like. And so I think that for me, getting sober, I mean, honestly, just raw sex is better. Like going to an amusement park is better. Going to literally like everything in life, watching TV is better. Going to the grocery store is better. I used to like take a hit of weed or something before going to the grocery store, just so I could not have to be at the store. And it's like, well, what if you had fun at the store? Like, it doesn't have to be awful. And so realizing there's so many parts of your life that you're just numbing out. And then say you go, a decade of that, and then you get sober. It's like, okay, you just lost a decade of your life because you had no emotions that whole time. Versus getting sober today, now you can actually start living. So I think that's something that is a huge thing, where not every part of your life is supposed to be just pure ecstasy and joy, because then that in and of itself becomes a baseline and it devalues it, right? So we need that up and down. We need to fluctuate a little bit to have those highs. And so I think by getting sober, you actually step into living more. It's so counterintuitive, but I personally think that that's the truest form of living, is sobriety. And also how courageous you have to be to go through life sober. Is I'm just like, wow, these people out here who are sober, they don't drink anything, they don't do any drugs. I'm like, these are the badasses. Fearless. These are the people. No, literally, like to go through life not numbing any part of it. That is a strong person right there. And so I look up to anybody who's sober, and it's like, wow,
including you.
So strong.
Get the mirror out. Get the mirror out. Watch the video.
Exactly.
No,
it's wild.
And you said something really amazing that just boing, had a light bulb go off, and is that you do numb the good stuff too. You numb your relationship. You numb, if you have a partner or a family member. That's something to think about for a minute. So And I was going to say something else about what you were just talking about. Oh, shoot. Probably went out the door. Well, it'll come back to me in a minute.
Yeah.
See, kids, don't do drugs. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm middle aged now. I can use that excuse because again,
Oh
I've
my
been sober
gosh.
for years. So,
Yeah.
but until I can capture that thought again, I really want to thank you so much for just being transparent. We've actually crossed fairly well over our hour that we said we would do, and you're always welcome to come back. In fact, I do want to check in with you again when things start rolling in for you and lives are changing and I'm sure you're doing
Yeah.
that now, but I just want to check in with you. Maybe we'll give it a few months or a year for things to incubate and bring you back and maybe have another conversation. But for now, that you were able to come on and have this conversation with me, I want to express my gratitude to you, because I think it is these type of conversations that will give other people the courage to make changes and to seek you out and to seek that help and guidance and whatever it is that gets somebody into those first few steps of their new life. So yeah, I think that thought is long gone. I guess it took off, but it
It's
relates.
all good.
Yeah, I was gonna say it relates to everything we've been talking about, so it's okay. But yeah, again, much gratitude to you for what you do. To the YouTube audience, there will be links down below for Nicole and her work, and we will get you all connected. You have a YouTube channel. Are you going to be doing some relevant content for your journey on that?
Yeah. Yeah. Just a little side note. I know that this is a problem that our government doesn't want us to solve, because I have been heavily censored. So I have been putting out content about it. But the censorship is wild. So I'm workshopping on how to get, the loopholes around it, what words are triggering the algorithm and stuff like that. So you could go directly to my channel and find the content. It's just not being pumped out like all my other videos before I started this stuff. So,
Yeah.
but yeah, I think if not working with me, someone, it doesn't have to be me, but at the same time, like, you also really don't have to do it how I did. You don't have to go through it alone. You can use resources, and there's so many options. And so whatever vibes for the audience, whatever vibes with you, I strongly advise that you seek them out.
Well said. Well said. Well, again, Nicole, this has been, it's not going to sugarcoat it. We dealt with you presented some things that, normally get swept under the rug or disregarded or numbed by drugs or whatever. And so again, I sit with you in awe that you do that and that you share your story and that it is for the benefit of others.
Yeah, thank you for having me on. Like, sharing this story is the way that I can create change.
Yep.
And so I am very grateful for you having me on as a guest.
Oh,
And
well,
it's been great.
yeah, this is where I want to be. I want to have these kind of conversations because I'm all about, because again, my thing, what I did and did to excess, is I don't want others to go through that. I put a hurting on myself,
Yeah.
hard hurting on myself, because that's the
Yeah.
level of hurt that was inside of me as a child. That's like you said, the 6-year-old or whatever, because I saw a lot of violence in my household as at that age, 6, 7, 8 years old, when the two people who should never have married and should never have had a child were, doing that stuff.
When they did. Yeah.
When they did all that. Yeah. But it's good. It's like you said, everything is either a master showing up to teach you something or a blessing, so everything I've lived through, I don't have a moment's regret. I don't judge any of it, including the worst of self-abuse and things like that. No, it's all led to, and I know you would probably concur, it's all led to this moment, which is going to lead to another moment. And if your perspective shift is, continually aligning itself to something that's, I always say, true, good, and beautiful, that if you're moving in that positive affect and positive valence, as a psychologist would say, keep going and never look back, so
Yeah.
there's my last soapbox moment before we say goodbye. But yeah, just know that, everything that's happened, and this could be another conversation, because it's something I did want to bring up with you, is how do we not become this like perennial victim in this perpetually aggrieved person. So maybe that's a starter for our next conversation.
Yeah, we should meet again. Like if your sober birthday's in January and so is mine. So we should meet up in January or something and
there
celebrate.
You go. Yay.
Yeah.
I'll bring more iced tea. This is my drug of choice now. A little coffee, a little iced tea.
Oh
so
my gosh.
but anyway, yeah, let's do that. That would be fun.
Yeah.
We'll stay in touch and reconnect on that. But yeah, that's something I'd like to cover with you, is that you are so positive and so willing to be a contributor rather than somebody who, and there's no judgment, but it's like we can get in those shells and we can, my dad
makes all the difference.
Yeah, my dad told me I'm good with my dad now. I mean, he and I we have peace and we get along for the most part. And he told me one time, he says, people who are tortured and abused, and he was referencing somebody else whose name shall not be mentioned, that they either blame the world or they blame themselves. And so I dealt with somebody who blamed the world, and I blamed myself, which was the self-torture and because I just did bad things to myself. But anyway, so recognize that and know that it's just natural. It's just part for the course. So we'll stop here and then we can pick up on that later and talk about that. All right, Nicole, thank you so much again. It was great. And to the YouTube audience, again, we'll have not only Nicole's information down there, but I'll have maybe a crisis hotline or some things for dealing with abuse issues with drugs and alcohol and things like that. I'll make sure there's some resources down there if you came to this conversation and are just on that fence, on that threshold. So, all right, Nicole, I'll say goodbye to you when we stop record, but to the YouTube audience, thank you guys. Take care. Be well.
Thank you.
Yeah.